You're listening to The Watchers, a show where two women from opposite ends of New Jersey watch TV about significant hair colors. It's not a haircut, but that red.
Yeah, it does. It's the same. It's a similar compulsion, I think, right?
It was a transformation.
Yeah, totally.
It was an end of one period of time and the beginning of another.
Yeah, that's funny. Because we've been doing so many pilots, we haven't really had a moment for someone to do this. But a show like this, it makes total sense that this is kind of like almost like, it's sort of the inciting incident for the whole rest of this episode.
Yeah, she didn't shave her head in the sink, but
no. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Jodie. And we watched My So-Called Life. And I am so emotional about it already. I've just been getting emotional texts from you for the last week. I know. This took me by surprise. I don't know why I didn't expect to feel this way about it. But like I was telling you before we started, like it's been since Pump Up the Volume, I think, since something has meant this much to me that we've talked about. And I didn't realize how worried I was that you were going to make fun of it or not like it because it feels like watching myself on television in the most embarrassing way possible because she's so cringe, but also so like lovable and real.
Yeah, she feels so real. And there's truly nothing more powerful than the stuff you loved when you were like a young teen, like an early adolescent, when your brain is still like making all its pathways. And
and I mean,
totally get it.
And like we've talked about this off mic. We always do this. I have talked to you about how when I was a teenager, and I'm not bragging because I don't think I actually look like Claire Danes, but when I was a teenager, a lot of people, and I think it was the haircut and the hair color, told me I looked like Claire Danes. Mm-hmm. And so I formed an unnatural attachment to Angela Chase because of that fact. And I think if we remember, since I couldn't find my seltzer this morning and you couldn't find your laptop, we'll see if we remember. But there is a photo of me with this Angela Chase hair that we may remember to post on Instagram. So look for that. But yeah, this show, I think I used the word tender when trying to describe it to you. Mm-hmm. Or like, I don't know, there's something that's so, like it just gets to that soft, gooey part of being a teenager so directly and so quickly that you're like almost taken aback by it.
Yeah, it feels really earnest. And oftentimes when people write teenagers for the screen, and we're going to have a really good example of that. I'll just say when we're obviously going to watch Dawson's Creek.
Obviously.
And I love the teens in that show. They are written so earnestly and so like in touch with their feelings, but in a way that feels but the way they talk about them feels totally unrealistic.
Yeah.
And this feels like she's trying to express what the kids in Dawson's Creek are allowed to express.
But she's an actual teenage idiot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, like a lot of the critiques, or not critiques, but commentary on this show was about how before and after this, there were a lot of shows where teenagers were like strangely aware of their emotions and able to articulate them in like really mature ways. And this is not that.
Right.
This is like, and Frank was lucky. Like, which watching it back, I was like, oh God, I forgot about that. But like, teenagers are idiots.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, they are idiots. And like, I was an idiot. Every teenager is an idiot at some point. And so I think that that's like representation of idiots is strong in this show. But that's what makes it so realistic. Like you feel totally. Like the feelings are real that she's having. It's not like she's just a dumb person. She's not. But she just doesn't understand like how myopic her view of the world is at that age.
I do also like that. Like the Anne Frank thing, I mean, we'll get into the. We can maybe get a little more structured, but the Anne Frank thing is a really good example of any other teen lead in a show like this would have had something really like smart and like more aware than the rest of the classmates to say about it.
Yeah. And but instead she's an idiot.
Yeah.
I also, even later on in the car with the cab driver, like she's trying to explain more articulately, like why the book is so important. And she's still not being that insightful about it. Like she's a little bit better, but it's like
it still feels real.
Yeah, it's like she understands it from her point of view, as a teenager who just like wants to crawl out of her skin all the time.
Exactly, yeah.
So just to, I guess, set us up, I have some like background structural information. So this show came out in 1994. The pilot aired on August 25th, 1994, but it was shot 17 months earlier in March 93, which is a long time to go. It's a long time to go between shooting and airing a show.
Do you know why it took so long?
I don't. I think so. I know that the filming was challenged by the fact that Claire Danes was an actual teenager, not a 20-something person. And so she was in school while this was filming. And so it was a slower process because of that. It also is why we see more of the parents in this than we do in other shows. It had to do with the amount of time she was able to film. Yeah.
Because that is really apparent. It's really apparent.
Yeah. No, it's notable. Patty and Graham continue to be a big part of the show throughout.
I kind of liked that for a change.
Yeah. It's more, so it feels more like a family show in the guise of like, I'm trying to think of things that came later, like Party of Five or a show where the teenagers are the main focus, but the parents are also like significant. It had a original order, I think, of 22 episodes. They only made 19. It was canceled after the first season. It was canceled before they finished 22 episodes, which is crazy.
Did it not do well at the time?
So it did okay. It didn't do well enough, I guess. It didn't do badly, but it was put up against, again, a bunch of really big heavy hitters. It was up against top 10 hit sitcoms like Mad About You and Friends, as well as Martin, Living Single, etc.
Yeah, they didn't stand a chance. That's a shame.
And it's, it was a taste we hadn't acquired yet for a show. It was like, these are like multicam sitcoms with like, studio audiences or laugh tracks. Like the vibe is just completely 180 degrees.
That's true too.
There wasn't anything like this.
Anything like it, yeah.
No, and it really resonated with a certain group of people, but not the general public, quote unquote, And so when it was canceled, I think this was technically the first like campaign to try to save a show during like the internet age. It was not successful. But
I just realized 1994
is when it started, yeah.
The gulf between the 90210 pilot and this one feels so much wider, but it is interesting. We're right on the edge of like the other side of the blowing up of like the grunge movement and like all of this. Yeah. So you can kind of really see that just putting these two episodes back to back.
Yeah. I mean, I was a senior in high school in 93 and I was listening to Nirvana and Pearl Jam and wearing flannel. I looked like Angela Chase. I mean, everyone told me I looked like Angela Chase. I swear. But like, it was the show for the people that didn't feel like they fit into what the other shows were offering. And those people became rabid fans. This was a weird thing that happened. And I remember this. It got canceled and then it got picked up by MTV and rerun the following year. And that never, like, we think about now with streaming, like, it comes out, it's available forever. But at the time, it comes out and then it's gone. You see an episode on ABC or whatever, and then you never get to see it again until maybe it comes out on DVD years later. And so the demand was so big for this show. They couldn't get a new season, but MTV, like, bought the rights and showed it week to week for the next, like, year. And I watched it again on MTV. I remember that. They would like have the cast as like guests on the MTV, like, introducing music videos and stuff.
And then That's really interesting.
There's some fun clips on YouTube of AJ Wilson Cruz and the girl who plays Sharon, whose name I'm losing, introducing a bunch of different music videos. That's really cute.
Really fun.
Yeah. Trying to be all like cool and flippy. And
I can't stop thinking about the fact that they filmed this while Kurt Cobain was still alive.
Yes.
And then he died, and then the show aired.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you want to explain the time frame of My So-Called Life, like that really gets it.
Right. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So it aired Thursday nights at 8:00, which is like a great time slot, but it was against a lot of really big stuff. Mm-hmm. The fan campaign, I don't know why I can't speak, was the first online internet campaign to save a show. There was a lot of sort of different takes on why it didn't work. One of which was Claire Danes was not psyched to come back because she was still in school.
Yeah.
Her schedule was crazy. She was like trying to balance actually being a high school student with all of the other, aspects of being a young actor that suddenly gained all this notoriety. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was part of it, but that wasn't, one aspect wasn't enough to actually keep it from coming back. There were a lot of factors. The network didn't really give it a lot of publicity at the time. Like, it really picked up with the MTV re-release because it reached its actual intended audience on MTV. Well, we'll talk about this later. There's some thoughts from the creator about what might have happened in a second season. We can talk about at the end. Mm-hmm. There's also a sequel novel called My So-Called Life Goes On, published in 1999 by someone named Catherine Clark. I don't know if she was associated with the show. I mean, I'm assuming in order to make that book happen, you had to somehow get the okay.
Right, yeah.
But,
yeah. I love stuff like that.
Yeah.
10 million downloads. That'll be our first book club.
There we go.
Reading.
There we go. 19 episodes. It ran from August 94 through, it was canceled on May 15th, 1995, set at the fictional Liberty High School in a fictional suburb near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania called Three Rivers. Directed by Scott Winant. Can't remember how to pronounce that properly. This episode was directed by him. He directed 3 of the 19.
Okay.
The writer is a woman named Winnie Holzman. She was the series creator. She's best known for writing the book for Wicked.
Not the book meaning for the musical.
For the stage, she's not the book. No, sorry.
I just want to clarify that for our listeners.
No, she wrote the book for the musical and won a Tony.
Which, I don't know what your feelings are on Wicked.
I don't have feelings on Wicked.
That musical is lovely, and it is so much about two young, really, it's about two young women in their relationship, in a way that it sort of makes sense. I was surprised to hear that name be the same person, but then in thinking about it, I was like, no, it makes sense that she'd be able to do that.
Yeah. So. She also worked on 30-something, which is a show that keeps coming up when we talk about these teen shows, that they're always billed as a teen 30-something or these ensemble shows about groups of friends. 30-something was a show that I was the wrong age, obviously, when it came out. I never really connected with, but I remember it's the height of its popularity.
Right.
So that's Winnie Holzman. She did part of her research for writing this show was she taught some classes at Fairfax High in LA for a few days.
Fun.
Yeah. She also kept a diary and wrote down journal entries from the perspective of a teenage girl that ended up being part of the voiceover.
Do you think that's when she wrote the line,
"Oh my God,
school is a battlefield for your heart"?
And that's one of the most famous lines from this show because it's so... But it's something I would have fucking written in my diary when I was 14.
And felt real. It's not actually saying anything, but it feels
so profound.
It's really good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why this show makes me so emotional is if I went back and found my diaries from high school, they would sound like her.
Right,
like,
yeah.
I'd sound like a fucking idiot, you know, and over dramatic, like thinking I'm being really poetic and profound. Like, yeah. This is
really
also
good.
Winnie Hulsman is also our one Jersey connection that I found. She has a degree in creative writing from Princeton. So.
So no Jersey connections then.
Right. Yeah, I know. It was the only one I could find, so I had to take it. But,
yeah, I understand.
The producer, one of the producers, Marshall Herskovitz, also worked on 30-something. So there's like a connection to that type of show. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just really... I love this quote, actually, from Winnie Hulsman about the early ending of the show. She said, this was a show about adolescence and it sort of ended in its own adolescence. There was an aura about how short the show was. Like all things that die young, the show ended at a point that it was still all potential.
Oh.
Which is true.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, that gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, I know. I don't think it would have the same hold on those of us that were Gen X and watched it in the moment if it continued. We'll talk about this when we talk about what some of the thoughts were for future seasons. Like, I think it might have ruined its own romance if it stuck around too long.
Right.
But other really, really important things about this is that, like, I know we're going to go into sort of a recap structure. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk more about Ricky because all I want to do is talk about Ricky. But I just want to put a pin in the fact that he was the first openly queer character on primetime TV and the first queer character of color and the first queer actor portraying a queer actor or portraying a queer person on primetime TV.
Wow. Yeah.
He was...
That's huge.
Insanely important to
I think I knew he was the first... Yeah. I think I knew he was the first bisexual character on primetime television. I didn't realize
openly
he was
queer. Yep. Generally.
At all. That's amazing.
Yeah. And even more... to me, almost even more importantly, like when he was at the time doing publicity, he was out as gay.
Yeah, that's huge.
It was such a huge deal. And there's a very brief clip of an interview with him where he gets emotional now as an adult talking about that, because some of the storyline that we get of Ricky later on was kind of taken from his life. And so he still has like an intense attachment, Wilson Cruz, the actor, to the character of Ricky Vasquez. Yeah. As does any queer person who grew up with the show, because he was just everything. He was not just like queer, and he was like sort of gender nonconforming in a lot of ways too. And the way he dressed and the way he, like, you know, as Graham comments, wears eyeliner. Like, it was just, he was much more himself than we had seen a teen character be before.
Yeah, there's so much about that. The fact that he's because obviously I'm sure that there are other characters in primetime TV who were coded as gay.
Sure, yeah.
I am thinking of like a Golden Girls episode there, but they were always like one-off characters. It was always hinted at through kind of like often offensive stereotypes.
Yeah. Or being gay was the issue, quote unquote. Yeah.
Yeah. But I kind of love the way it's even directly addressed in the episode. It is the parents being a little out of touch, but it's just, there's no like big coming out for him.
No.
It's just the parents being kind of like doofuses about what it even means to be bisexual, but it's not like a huge...
Well, we've talked about the time cover before. What year does that time cover come out? I'm so happy I got to show you that cover. It was so funny. 1995.
Yeah.
So the next year, Time was like, hey, did you know there's this thing called bisexuals?
God, this cover, I know we've already talked about it. It's so funny.
It looks like they're like trying to, you know, seduce you into something, but badly.
Yeah, it's actually Newsweek, not Time.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry to shade Time. It was Newsweek.
Bisexuality, not gay, not straight. A new sexual identity emerges. It's so funny. Crawls out from the sewers.
Yeah. Well, and the guy on the right looks a little like budget Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Oh, totally. I can totally see that.
Yeah. So
happy birthday, bisexuality.
Oh, my God.
I'm looking at.
It's so funny. But yeah, so this was a year. This was filmed 2 years before that, came out a year before. So, you know, groundbreaking Ricky Vasquez.
Well, probably had a lot to do with that, like them even
being in the zeitgeist
story.
In the culture. Yeah, totally. Because it was a big deal at the time.
The fact that it's a teenager is like, I'm wondering how much of that sparked outrage and how much of that was them being like, well, you know how young people, they don't really know what they want.
Well, not to ruin anything for you if you do ever watch the rest of this, but there's a gay teacher later on also, which is like, I'm not going to say anything else. I think the rest of this is worth watching. I really do. And I might finally rewatch the rest of it. I think I said I've gotten through a few of the first episodes a couple of times in the last decade, but I always get distracted by something else. I think honestly what it is it's so emotional for me that I have to be in an okay place mentally to watch it.
That makes sense, yeah.
You know, I can't be feeling vulnerable at the time or it's all over. I'm just going to start weeping.
Because I was just too young for this, like by just a few years, and then didn't go back to it. But I can imagine this would have been huge for me.
It was everything. And
so I get it.
It was also the birth of obsession with Jared Leto.
That's another thing is like
now you understand why people forgive him for all this shit for so long, because he was fucking Jordan Catalano.
I was just going to say sort of like kind of the opposite. I mean, I remember him being, because he's in one of my like guilty pleasure movies, Urban Legend.
I've never seen it. No.
It's a horror movie with Joshua Jackson.
Yeah, of course I haven't seen it.
And I loved it, and he's in that too. For me, it's almost the opposite. Well, it's not the opposite, but it's like, it's so hard to watch him and find anything attractive about him now.
Because you're not 15.
Yeah. Well, and because I know what he becomes.
But like when you're 15, it's so funny to watch this now and be like, oh, he's an empty shell that she's projecting everything onto. But in the moment, you're like, he is so deep and moody and tortured, and I love him and I want to save him. Like,
I love that I thought
a moron.
The big reveal about him was that he couldn't read. I didn't realize he is a known idiot from like her first description of him is that he was left back twice.
Yep. The quotes about him are incredible. We should probably just start going through the episode because we can talk a little bit about each cast person as we go when they come up. But just to put a period on the Jared Leto sentence for the moment, he's one of those only supposed to be in the first episode, but then his chemistry on screen was really electric and they kept him around. He became a continuing character. Mm-hmm. So we start with this weird little handheld camera, like direct address at the mall, like Angela and Rayanne kind of trying to scam people out of money.
Yeah, that was a little confusing for me at first.
Yeah.
Especially because I didn't realize they were at the mall. Because there's that phone booth that looks like a British phone booth. And I was like, are they on some weird school trip?
Yeah. I think that's the LA of it all. Like the 1990s LA. Yeah. I mean, to me, that is just supposed to show like that Rayanne is the friend that makes her be like free and silly and do crazy shit.
She's a bad influence.
They're
both really charming in that scene, though. It did endear me to both of them right away.
Well, and you see that sweet, like, early female friendship where you're just kind of obsessed with each other and, like, falling all over each other and, you know, like, pretending to be sisters is such a thing when you're like you know, my best friend and I growing up looked nothing alike. We could not have looked less alike, and we would try to convince people we were sisters. So, yeah. But that opening scene is a little disjointed to me now, but...
Yeah, I wonder I understand what it does for the characters, but it definitely feels like something that was added on after, like, they showed it to a test audience or something, and I wonder...
Yeah. The camera work is very MTV.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we talked about this with 90210, but I feel like the MTV influence is real strong here.
Mm-hmm.
But then we go to school and we get our first introduction to Sharon, talking about the yearbook.
Mm-hmm.
Poor Sharon, played by Devin Odessa. She's just instantly irritating.
Yeah.
She's the old friend that is about to be, or is in the process of being dumped for the new friend.
It's funny that the squares on these shows really love Yearbook Club.
They do.
It's a real shorthand.
Yeah, it really is. The people really into yearbook.
As a photographer, How big was yearbook club in your high school?
I thought you were going to ask if I was creepy like Brian, hanging around with my camera. Yearbook. So I was involved with yearbook, sort of peripherally though, because as I've said many times on this podcast, I spent most of my time in high school smoking behind the cafeteria. But I was a photography student. I took photo all 4 years of high school. So I was obviously involved somewhat in like the photo part of it, but not enthusiastically, I would say. It was not a part of my personality. Like I was much more interested in like hanging out in parking lots and smoking cigarettes. But, you know, photo nerd, so therefore naturally involved.
Right.
But yeah, no, I thought you were going to bring up Brian because I have thoughts about his photography.
And his hanging out in trees. And
as someone who used to hang out in trees, I feel like I'm not supposed to critique that. But
I don't think you were hanging out in a tree so you could make sure you had a bird's eye view when your neighbor got home.
Actually, okay. I was hanging out in a tree being Harriet the Spy. We've talked about this. But it wasn't because I was like crushing on someone. It was because I was nosy and creepy.
Yeah, that's different.
Yeah. So then we get the voiceover starting. The voiceover is so important, and it's so like simultaneously sincere and cringe and like, I found the script because I felt like it was important because some of the lines are really like, iconic. This is where she says school is a battlefield for your heart. Yeah. And really she says, good. So when Rayanne Graff told me my hair was holding me back, I had to listen because she wasn't just talking about my hair. She was talking about my life.
And then my so-called life goes unsaid, but you can hear it. It's, you know.
Yeah. And before that, you texted me this line. I started hanging out with Rayanne Graff just for fun, just because it seemed like if I didn't, I would die or something.
I would die or something. Man, that feeling
I know
is real, but it is.
Yeah. I would argue in retrospect that it's a bit of a bisexual feeling, but I don't think that that's what was actually coded in this show.
Yeah, I know. I wondered, but I don't think so.
I don't think it's there. But yeah, she's basically talking in the voiceover about how people's expectations are too much for her to bear. Which I get. I mean, there's a point in your life where, like, you're like, wait, why have I always been this person? And can I be something else?
Right. Totally. You know? Yeah. And also that you think you're the only person who's ever felt that way. Even though everybody feels that way.
Yeah. Yeah. We get some little vignettes of, like, Brian getting bullied in the hallway, the cheerleaders. Like, it's setting up the typical high school stratification that we're used to seeing. And then we get her mom. We meet Patty.
Just the most nervous lady.
I know. Played by Bess Armstrong as Patty Chase. She is so awkward and so uncomfortable and so fluttering around her daughter in this like uncomfortable way.
These parents are so interesting. Like,
I know.
What are they doing?
They don't know. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, they really don't know what they're doing. I definitely feel like Patty is holding on way too tight to a child and trying to keep her the same. Meanwhile, ignoring the younger one. We'll get to that. But she makes a comment. She's kind of mean about the hair throughout this. She said, I thought it had died of natural causes. Like, it's kind of rude.
Yeah, she's kind of a jackass to her kid a little bit.
She is. We also get one of my favorite lines personally, where she says, I cannot bring myself to eat a well-balanced meal in front of my mother. It just means too much to her. That's at the dinner table.
That's such a good line.
It means so precise.
That's exactly the word I was going to use because it gets so much across of like the like rebellion for the sake of it.
Yeah.
You know, and in everything and what the fact that is what matters so much to her mom, this thing that doesn't really in the long run matter. It's everything. I was really struck by that little line.
It's such a
it's
line.
Funny.
Yeah.
And it does so much.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you have to have those kind of lines to balance out her saying things like, you know, school's a battlefield for your heart. Like, she's got to have some insight.
Mm-hmm.
The next line after that, though, is someone with misophonia. It really made me feel seen. She said, if you stop to think about, like, chewing, what it really is, how people just do it, like, in public. Yeah. Representation is important.
But it's also...
Don't chew around me.
She is so... when I say painfully self-aware, I don't mean in the way of, like, understanding who she is.
Yeah.
I mean, she's thinking about the act of eating in front of other people as, like, something, like, people are witnessing and feeling, like... Because she says, like, the fact that people do it, but she means that, like... The fact that it's something I do and have to do in front of people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, she just is so focused on, like, even just the problem with the cheerleaders. Can't people just cheer to themselves? Yeah. Like in their head or something like that.
Yeah. That's a
like
good one.
Just anything that puts a spotlight on a person is stressful to her, I think.
And I think that's one of the things I related to the most was like, I just wanted no one to see me ever when I was a teenager. Like, don't perceive me.
Right. But then backed up against, but also I'm going to color my hair and do this thing that is, like, going to draw attention to me, and having, like, both of those things at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crimson glow, Andrea.
Yeah, it's not red. Excuse me. It's crimson glow.
Yeah. So they're at the dinner table. We're having this awkward conversation. We're hearing her voiceover. And she says, my dad thinks every person in the world is having more fun than him, which could be true. Because he's, like, talking about Axl Rose trying to be cool.
He is.
Yeah, should we talk about Graham?
Character.
So Graham, Angela's dad, wanted to be a chef, never went to chef school.
Yeah, he's a little bit of the, like, sad dad club where it's like, you know, he is his unrealized potential. He never went to chef school, and his wife is his boss. How emasculating, huh?
Exactly. And I think one of the things that's interesting about the attention they pay to the parents and that storyline specifically is, like, it is a real thing. Mm-hmm. Like, when the woman makes more money than the man, or is in a position of power in a relationship, like, especially in the 90s, but even now, I was just gonna say, it still can be challenging. Mm-hmm. So I do think that it's something that hadn't really been portrayed gently,
right,
on television. So
yeah, because like the lazy version is that she is, like,
a bitch, and yeah.
And she's not. And no, you can tell they do care about each other.
Yeah. They do. I mean, you find out they weren't high school sweethearts, but they went to high school together. Yeah. And the mom was super popular.
Mm-hmm, of course.
Which is, again, another sort of divide between her and Angela, because and she doesn't understand what it's like to not have an easy time in high school.
Right.
But Graham is corny. He's also really uncomfortable with his daughter now. Like,
I know that's what they're trying to do. I would say the biggest miss in this show is how they portray that. She even says, like, my breasts have come between us. And I understand that it is probably, I have such little patience for this kind of thing. I understand that it is probably difficult to see your child turn into an adult. Mm-hmm. Right? But that, like, I don't know.
I know. It rings a little off or strange now, like, listening to it.
Like, because he says, like, tell her not to walk around in a towel. And I'm like...
Yeah, that's where it gets a little, like, dude.
That is a you problem, and
exactly.
It is a capital P problem.
Yeah.
Like,
no, 100%. 100%. Yeah, the, like, being uncomfortable around your child as they change and you don't know what to do, like... That's one thing. Mm-hmm. But then being like, she needs to do this because I'm uncomfortable. No. He's so uncomfortable that he forgets that Anne Frank is the subject of a book. He has to, she's a sophomore.
She's a sophomore too?
Yeah.
Yeah. He, like, Anne drops Frank, all his books. Yeah. He's like a flustered teenager.
I know.
It's so weird.
He's a little bit emasculated is the right word, I think, in his portrayal, especially in the beginning. It changes a bit later on. Like, the parent story does not end with this episode, and so he does have more facets to him going forward.
Right.
But then we have a conversation, such a moment in time. We have a conversation with Graham and Patty in bed where she's like commenting on how hard it must be to be Chelsea Clinton.
I know.
She's not wrong.
No. But yeah.
Graham is reassuring her that, you know, Angela could be cutting class, doing drugs, having sex, like we did. But
she burns him pretty good there.
Yeah.
Or is it, which one of them says like we did?
She Graham does, and then Patty says, I never cut class and you never had sex in high school.
That's right.
Yeah. But Patty makes this about herself like she does with everything, which really made me nuts then and now. You know, she did it to get a reaction about the hair color. And it's like, no, maybe she just wanted to express herself.
Yeah.
You narcissist.
Yeah. The last thing actually she wants from you is a reaction about anything.
Yeah. She wants you to stop existing for a moment. But then we go back to school, and this is where all of the descriptions of Jordan start. And I'm like, I can't. Once I almost touched his shoulder in the middle of a pop quiz.
So funny.
It's so real. He's always closing his eyes like it hurts to look at things. It's like she's projecting everything onto him. Like he has allergies, girl. We get the setup of the new friend, old friend here. Like Sharon sees Angela's hair and is clearly like, ugh, gross. And Rayanne pulls her into the bathroom. This was also, people smoking in the bathroom made me really nostalgic for some reason. It's like, that was a thing. I smoked in the bathroom in high school.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't, but it was definitely a thing.
But yeah, Rayanne is kind of badgering Angela about wanting to have sex with Jordan Catalano.
I like that Rayanne is a little bit of she's like a little pushy and a little bit of a shit starter, but she's not. It's the same thing with 90210, where I expected the new friends to be kind of mean girling.
Yeah.
The less cool girl, but that's really not.
No.
She's like teasing her a lot, but it seems to be in a playful way where she doesn't, she's not actually trying to hurt her.
No, I think she clearly loves Angela. Like she like wants to be around her.
Yeah.
She invites, she says, you have to come to Tino's tomorrow night because Jordan will definitely be there. The voiceover here is Angela saying, Rayanne always knows who's going to be there. And I think we're seeing with Rayanne like right away that she's a little closer to the edge of living dangerously than maybe is comfortable. Like she's a free spirit, but also like we're getting a sense that she has very little boundaries in her life.
Right. Yeah.
Gosh, Rayanne. So actually the actress or actor that plays Rayanne, what's her last name? Her first name's AJ. AJ Langer. She is now a countess. Did you see this?
No.
She married a man named Charles Courtenay, and whose father has recently died, or not recently, but whose father died. And so Charles is the Count of Devon, or no, the Earl of Devon, and she is the Countess of Devon.
That rules.
She's a countess now.
Good for her.
Rayanne had a big step up in life.
Now, did she happen to get married in like 2013? Do you know?
I do not know why.
Just because that's when she stopped acting, and I think that's when I would stop acting as well.
Yeah, if you became a countess, yeah, you probably don't need to worry too much anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
And we also just quickly get another Sharon being annoying moment where she says, I can't believe you did that to your hair without telling me.
Yeah, it is another thing where it's like the getting left behind feeling is very real.
Because we're meant to side with Angela here, but also, like, if you were Sharon and your best friend just, like, kind of pieced out on you and disappeared to, like, hang out with someone cooler, you'd be sad.
Yeah.
You'd be hurt.
Yeah, she is annoying, but I do...
Yeah. But you get the sense that they've been childhood friends forever.
Exactly. She says, like, I just think you should know what people are saying about you. And it's like, Sharon, I don't think anybody's saying that but you.
Yeah.
I think you're just looking for a way to tell Angela how you're feeling.
Oh, definitely.
But go off, girl.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. This is where the yearbook meeting happens. And Brian with the camera, man, like giving photographers a bad name. Just creeping on Angela with that camera the whole time.
It's a really good shorthand for, I mean, it's not really what they're trying to do, but like you put a camera in a character's hands and you're immediately like, I don't know how I feel about it.
Especially a male character. It is weird. Oh, I missed one of my favorite lines. Yeah, it's right. It's in between the bathroom and the yearbook. She describes Jordan. She says, I just like how he's always leaning against stuff. He is always leaning. And closing his eyes.
Well,
because
that's
tired.
Because she's in love with him.
I know.
Because of these things. It's so funny. It's so high school.
I know. And I think it's important to note that, like, she is about the same age as, like, when we watched 90210 last week, like David Silver and Scott. So, like, she's not supposed to. It's so funny. Like, we're drawing this big distinction between a sophomore and a junior in high school. But, like, it is a weird dividing line in a way. 15 is quite young.
Yeah, absolutely.
How did you feel about the yearbook scene? So you asked me about my yearbook experience as an aspiring literary person. Were you involved in the yearbook?
No, I was involved in nothing in high school.
that checks out somehow.
Yeah. It doesn't even count as extracurricular. The only like extracurriculars I was involved with in extracurricula, I was involved with in high school was choir, which I took as an elective during the school day, and something called Journeyman's Club, which is Jodie. I could explain. I don't know how they got away with it. It was just after school. It was just field trips, like extra field trips. So like we went to Longwood Gardens and we went to like maybe one other museum. And I think one year we went to Great Adventure. Now that I think about it, like it must have just been like the school had to like spend some budget. Yeah. You know what I mean? So they made a club that was expensive to run. I have no idea how they justified it because there were no like meetings or anything for it.
You just went places.
We just went places a couple of times a year.
Okay.
And it was called Journeyman's Club. They were literally the only things I was part of.
That's hilarious. Okay. So not worried about the yearbook theme.
No. Also, was your yearbook themed ever?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Ours was themed.
What does that mean?
The theme was like adventure stories. So we had a whole photo shoot. I was not involved in this. Like I said, I was
This is
unenthusiastically involved in the yearbook. It had a theme of like adventure stories. And so there's a whole photo shoot with like all the popular kids.
Of course.
Where they dressed up in outfits from different classic stories. It's I'll show it to you sometime. It's hilarious. It's really self-involved exercise. It's very upper middle class white high school yearbook.
Our yearbook, there was not that.
Yeah.
You could pay. One thing they did is during lunch, you could pay to take pictures with your group of friends. And then
you had to pay?
Yeah, and then there was a chance that it would be included in the yearbook.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. That's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like a whole thing of like, who asked you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, it was definitely a thing as to who ended up in those photos in the yearbook for sure. So Angela doesn't want to be on yearbook and she cannot explain why. And she leaves awkwardly through the door with Brian photographing her. And then in the kitchen at Angela's house, Sharon is there again, picking up her copy of Anne Frank. You can see from this that like Sharon has been a part of this family forever. Like she's been Angela's best friend since they were kids because like the parents are super comfortable with her and she just kind of blends right in. But she throws Angela under the bus again. She just brings up that she quit yearbook, probably knowing that Angela didn't tell the family.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And mom gets upset. I thought you liked your book. When were you planning on telling me? Mm-hmm. We do have a moment of self-awareness for Patty here, though, because she's like, listen to me. Did you ever think I dreamed I would sound like this?
Yeah. I liked that.
Yeah. She's a real person. Like, she's not just the annoying mom. Like, she's struggling with being the annoying mom. Mm-hmm. I love these bathroom scenes. Rayanne's like, so Ricky, Angela's in love with Jordan Catalana. We have to help her. And Ricky, I love fucking Ricky so much. He goes, don't you love how he leans?
He gets it.
He does. But just that, like, Ricky hanging out in the girls' room with them is also, like, it's really poignant to me. Like, he's not comfortable around the guys at school. Mm-hmm. Like, totally. He is much more comfortable with them in the girls' room. There's, like, a montage of different classroom scenes where no one is paying attention and half of them are sleeping. And Brian repeatedly is the only person answering questions.
We're supposed to like him?
I don't think so. Well, so I think we're supposed to have some sympathy for him, which I kind of don't. I think before we started recording, I made some comment about how if he was real today, he would be on like a men's rights forum because he is very sort of entitled and kind of feels some ownership. I mean, so does Sharon. Feels some ownership over Angela, which I find extremely annoying. But I think we're supposed to have more sympathy for him than maybe I do.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a hard time having sympathy for either one of them. You're totally right that they both... And to a degree, especially for Sharon, I understand why you might feel betrayed by this like sudden change, I guess, that Angela's going through. Change isn't, whatever. But but it's hard. I think as an adult, maybe it's harder to like look at these kids and feel, I don't know. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is.
Yeah, like I do feel sympathy for Sharon. I also think she's kind of being a dick, but I also think I probably would have been a dick too. About the same things.
Right, exactly.
We get a brief moment with the comment about how Anne Frank was lucky. There's a lot of these lines that have stuck with me over the years. Right after that, she's asked to stick around during lunch to talk to that English teacher that was horrified at her comment. And we get seeing a teacher's actual lunch is so depressing.
Again, another line that is saying so much if you really dig into it. Like,
and as someone who is on the other side of that now and like brings a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to work, it's hard to
because it's like, it's so hard for, even through college, like, I could feel my students not really seeing me as a whole person.
100%.
Also, understanding that adults in general, when you're that young, have lives that continue on when you're not in the room.
Yeah.
It takes some work. Also, that she is eating a sad little lunch.
As most of us do.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, the teachers, I feel like somebody should write a thesis on, and it's not, I will not do it as much as I might want to, about the way teachers are portrayed in these teen shows. Because
wait
there's everything.
Get till Dawson's Creek. Oh boy.
Well, and like everything from like the teachers in Ferris Bueller, which come to mind, like that sort of detached, uncaring, the sort of evilness of some of the teachers in like Pump Up the Volume, the one
or Better Off Dead.
Yeah, or Better Off Dead. And the one in Heathers that puts on that fake fundraiser situation.
Yeah,
like
totally.
There's all these different ways that the non-parental adults are framed in these shows. That's super interesting. There's like categories. But the teacher says something about, excuse my eating, but with all these cutbacks, I don't really get a lunch break on Thursdays.
Yeah, oof.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Man, 20, what is that, 30? 95.
95, yeah, 94.
Almost 30 years ago.
94, actually, yeah, 30 years ago. Angela gets to express out loud a little bit here her angst, talking about how when people think you have a certain personality and you can't change it because it makes things harder for people.
And that's especially like we talked last week a little bit about Brandon and Brenda coming to a new school and how their reputations don't follow them and what that does for both of them. And Angela doesn't have that. Like she clearly, I mean, we see that with Sharon, who is so sure of who Angela should be that she can't even color her hair without Sharon having a meltdown.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is her trying to reinvent herself within a context where no one wants her to.
Exactly.
Except her new friends. You know, I mean, I will say like they're set up as the quote unquote bad influences, but the friendship between Rayanne and Ricky and Angela is so sweet and beautiful and also really like heart-wrenching later on. Like there's a lot of emotional turmoil, but it feels really like sincere and real that they love being around each other.
That's one of the things about the show that feels really realistic is that like, I mean, we had quote unquote bad kids in our school for sure. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying we didn't, but it's almost always more nuanced than that.
Well, and often the bad kids are just the poor kids.
Well, also that. Yeah.
Yeah. We
didn't really have, well, I know that like, I think you went to a school that was a little more stratified, right?
Yes.
We didn't really have rich kids in our school, but we definitely had like the kids there's like one development on the bus route that was that had like more in-ground pools than the other neighborhoods, you know. And like those kids were a little more popular, I think, for that reason. But in general, we didn't have quite as much of a class divide.
Well, the in-ground pool versus the above-ground pool is definitely a class line.
It's a marker.
Yeah.
It's just maybe a little less severe, but we still. But all of that to say that, like, it is something that I think the show gets right, that it's not as obvious as that.
Yeah. Yeah. We get a quick kitchen scene with Dad where this is where she explains the situation with him wanting to be a chef and he sells printing instead.
What does that mean?
It's a printing vendor. Like, you just send stuff to the printing. Yeah. There's a salesperson.
He sells a verb.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a salesperson at a printing place.
I'm sure, but
yeah,
I just...
No, I know, it's phrased interestingly. But she lies and goes to a party.
I know I'm digging too deep into a little throwaway line, but it is like how many people don't know what their parents actually do for a living.
Fair. I mean, my dad sold sneakers, so that was pretty easy.
That's pretty... My dad was a cop, so that's pretty specific, but...
Yeah.
Wait, hold on. Now I really want to get into this.
You won't let me get to the party. I want to talk about Tino.
Nobody's going to the party, okay?
No, I want to talk about Tino, who we never see.
There's so much paper sales in television because he sells printing. The Office makes an entire series about it. The main dad from Heroes is a quote unquote paper salesman. It's such a shorthand for like a job that no one cares about.
It's like an innocuous, uninteresting office type.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, can we move on to the party? Or do you have other things to say about printing?
I really wish I did. Oh boy, I really, really wish I did, but I think we can get there.
We'll move on to Tino's party, which we just had a pilot last week with a teen party at a mansion that was very early 90s, late 80s, early 90s feeling. And this feels very... Like, I think in both there was probably a guy with Liberty Spikes. Because that's true. Just shorthand for, like, there's a crazy punk here. Which, you know, you have to have a crazy punk at your party where your parents aren't home and people are, like, maybe trashing the house.
Yeah. And you have to have Animal Bag playing, obviously.
Yes, naturally. Yes. Some stage diving.
Who rented the lighting for this party?
It's pretty...
Do you know how expensive... I mean, you probably do know how expensive that would be.
It's pretty professional. Yeah, Tino, I think, does this regularly.
Right.
Like, Tino We never meet Tino, actually. He's just a name. But I think Tino probably like has parents that are never there and just regularly throws these parties. Maybe Tino invested in a lighting kit.
That's a good point. Once you're renting more than a couple of times a year,
you just gotta buy it.
You just gotta.
Doesn't make financial sense otherwise. But
no,
this to me,
he's like their Marianne Moore, right? Like,
yes. Sorry, it took me a minute to catch where that name came from. Yes, he is their Marianne Moore, but in a much trashier way. Like, it's a Pittsburgh versus Beverly Hills divide. So Angela gets pushed in the mud, which just felt so... Like, the humiliation of being perceived yet alone and then being, like, shoved into the mud by a stage diver. One of the best conversations ever on television is what we see next. She goes into the house to find the bathroom, and Jordan is watching MTV, I'm assuming. It's the Divinals video.
Yeah, and I wonder if when it aired, if I have to assume you could actually hear that that's what was playing.
Maybe.
Yeah. Although there is something interesting about him watching it on mute.
Yeah. Yeah. But eventually he acknowledges that she is there. She looks like a baby. She's like awkwardly leaning against the door, like he awkwardly leans against things. And he says, "This doesn't seem like a Friday." And she says, "It's Thursday." And he says, "Oh, are you sure?" And she says, "Well, yesterday was Wednesday, so." And he says, "Oh, right." And she says, "So that's how I know."
I love that he's actually an idiot and open
he's
and just
such an idiot.
Again, it's not a big secret that this idiot can't read. He is just.
He also doesn't know what day it is.
Yeah, exactly. Like, not being able to read is kind of the least of his problems so far to me.
But again, the realism of being so in your own head about a person that you think this is a profound conversation or that this was your chance to have a profound conversation. Yeah. And then his friends are like, "Let's go." And he leaves.
It's really good. It's really good.
It's Thursday. Are you sure? Well, yesterday was Wednesday.
You know what this reminds me of is I think you didn't watch Mean Girls as many times as I did when it came out, right?
No, I watched it, but maybe once.
There's that whole little montage of Katie cataloging all of the times she interacts with Aaron Samuels, who's the boy she has a crush on. And that's where that on, I forget what date it is, Mean Girls, real ones will know. But she says something like, on October 5th, he asked me what day it was. And
right.
It's very much that.
It was every single interaction. That's what she says about how she almost touched his shoulder during, cataloging all of that. She goes home and Patty's mad, of course. She has to be the mean one.
Which isn't fair.
No, Dad is being the cool guy and letting her do stuff. And then, Patty says, "She loves you more. I accept that, but that's not enough for you." Also, I absolutely love the little sister in these scenes.
She's great.
Danielle. It's like in some of these shows and movies we've watched, the little sister or little brother is kind of purely an irritation. In this case, it's it's a joke that no one will look at this child.
And she's really funny. She's doing that whole thing about wanting to watch the true crime documentary about the women who make obscene phone calls for a living.
Yeah. She makes obscene phone calls for her job, and then one of them tries to kill her, which apparently may actually be a film called Lisa, which I've never heard of. But
amazing.
But yeah.
10 million downloads, we'll watch Lisa.
Yeah. But she's like, no one is paying attention to her. She's talking about gymnastics. At some point, she's doing a handstand.
The shot is so funny because you just see her feet in the air.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah. She's like, no one is ever going to look at me at all. Her dad yells at her for a second. That's like, I'm sorry. Like,
that's another thesis someone should write is on
the little brother and sister.
The little brother and sisters. They're in so much of what we've watched. She reminds me the most of a slightly more realistic version of the little brother and Better Off Dead, where it's like if you found out she was building a rocket in her bedroom, you'd be like, kind of checks out.
Absolutely. Yes. They're back in school. Rayanne wants to go to a rave now. At a
Things
place
are escalating.
A place called Let's Bolt. Yeah, first it was Tino's party. Now it's a rave at a club. Which again, we talked about this last week. Going to clubs as a person too young to go to clubs was a thing in the 90s. Like it is a thing that many of us did or tried to do. But it's that Rayanne is a little bit dangerous thing. She says you have to look tough though. Which
you have to look tough.
She's a 15-year-old.
Yeah, good luck. Rayanne, you don't look tough.
No. We get a classic teen show line. The cafeteria is the embarrassment capital of the world.
It's true.
It really is. It's like a prison movie. There's a few. She says something about a drive-by shooting at some point.
Yeah, it's like when your parents ask you how was school, it's like asking how was the drive-by shooting.
Yeah, this was before Columbine, but it was during like the heyday of like carjackings, I think, in LA, and drive-by shootings were like a theme. Yikes. But so she lies again. Oh wait, we have to talk about the Ricky scene though, where she's defending Ricky to her parents. Yeah, so we're at the dinner table. The little sister's talking about the movie. And then, oh gosh, Patty calls Rayanne rude because she ate all her cheese.
She offered the cheese.
Yep. And so
that the cheese moment I was really struck by too, because the mom is so awkward and nervous there. And it's, for a second, I was like, what are we doing? But it is also like, teenagers are so difficult to be around.
They really are.
Like, I kind of get it. And especially if you were a popular girl who was like really aware of had to kind of like be aware of how other teenagers felt about you, because you could lose that popularity in an instant. Yeah. Like, I'm kind of not surprised.
Yeah, she's really uncomfortable around... Well, she's perfectly fine around Sharon because she's known her since she was a little kid, but she's really uncomfortable around Rayanne and Ricky. But so as Angela is trying to go to this rave that she's lying about and saying she's just going to sleep over at Rayanne's house...
they're like, are they auditioning? Is it they're practicing for a play they might all do? Is that then?
Oh,
she gives that excuse. That's I believe, so good.
Or no, I think that was for the first time. But yeah, they're practicing for a play. This time, I think she just was going to spend the night at Rayanne's house.
Okay.
But she says, you don't even have to drive me because Ricky's cousin said he would. And she's like, oh, Ricky's cousin. Why didn't you say? And she says to Graham, you haven't met this Ricky.
This Ricky.
Yeah. And Angela says, stop calling him this Ricky. Danielle is talking about doing parallel bars. Patty says, I find Ricky a little confusing. And this is where Angela says, okay, so maybe he's bi. Who cares? His cousin can still drive.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Bisexuals, their cousins can totally drive.
Totally drive. Yeah.
It's a common misconception that they can't, but they can.
Bisexuals, maybe not, but their cousins.
Okay.
I'm a very good driver. I'm kidding. But Patty gets really freaked out by the term bi. And do you hear these terms she's throwing around? Danielle helpfully goes, it means bisexual. But Patty is not an ally at this point. We do see, if you watch the rest of it, there's some nicer moments for her and Ricky. But she says, how can he be by anything? He's a child. He's obviously very confused.
So dismissive. So common, though. That's sometimes still something you hear people say today. So
yeah. She mentions that he wears eyeliner, and Graham is interested in it.
There's a version of this show, and maybe I don't get the impression that's where they were going, but there are a few little seeds planted where if you found out that Graham was having his own sort of identity journey, you wouldn't be totally shocked.
Well, he is kind of having an identity crisis. It's just not in the era or a part of his life that is his sexuality, I think.
Right, exactly. Yes, he's clearly having an identity crisis. I'm saying my thought is there's a version of this show where that identity crisis is rooted in his sexuality.
Totally. Angela outright lies to her mom here. She says, or her dad, actually. The dad says, is the girl's mother going to be there? And she says, no, Rayanne lives by her wits in an alley. Yes, obviously. I mean, she's a mother. They live in the same place. Obviously, her mother's going to be there. Her mother's explicitly not going to be there. Yeah.
She's funny.
Danielle's doing her handstand. Mm-hmm. So the next bit is Angela's outing, right? So she's outside changing her clothes into her tough outfit. Mm-hmm. Brian is circling her on the loneliest bicycle in the world in the street, kind of being a dick.
Yeah, I would say more than kind of. I would say definitely being a dick. Do you have the... He says something shitty there.
He says a lot of shitty things. He says, you're breaking like 14 different laws. You looked better before. Oh, look at me. I'm way cool. I'm off with my way cool friends to sniff floor wax. She starts putting on makeup and he says, that's right, cover, that's it.
God.
Who are you waiting for, Catalano? Maybe you're not going anywhere. Maybe you're just an exhibitionist. He's being a real dick. You're not stupid. Don't act like it. It's a stupid act. And she says, everybody's an act, including you, and gets in the car.
Good burn.
But at the very end, he says, so have a really amazing night, okay? I'm going to throw up now. Have a wonderful time. I mean, he's not subtle. His feelings on the matter.
So stressed about what Angela's doing. Leave her alone.
It starts to make you understand why she feels so, like, repressed.
Yeah.
Because everybody seems strangely invested in everything she does. They go to the club. Tino's not there, of course.
Right. I'm trying to keep us on track, but there is something so real about feeling like when you're that age that everybody around you cares about every move you make and that one wrong move is going to ruin your whole life. Totally. But the thing you learn as you get older is that's not true and nobody cares about anybody but themselves.
Yeah.
But, this is a show that is like very clearly focalized through Angela. Like that's why we get those voiceovers, right? So
Well, one thing you may or may not know is that in the 19 episodes, there's 2 episodes where the voiceover is not Angela.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's 2 other people.
Who gets the voiceovers?
Brian.
Oh, God.
The episode is called Life of Brian, which is funny.
That is funny.
And Danielle, the sister.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah.
I might just go watch that episode. Yeah. I love that. That's really fun.
Well, I don't know if
they picked the best and the worst people for those 2 that I'd be interested. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm breaking news here, but we will eventually maybe be doing some Halloween episodes of TV shows, and the Halloween episode of this show may be on that list. So I think the thing I like about the scene while they're waiting for Tino to show up when he never does, it's like the first scene. It's those little friendship moments of the like giddiness of friendship when you're having these conversations sitting in a parking lot and they're like trading shoes and, which yes, is a metaphor. Fine. But it's also just a cute thing that like friends do, trade clothes and stuff. Ricky asks what you would want someone to say like right before. Oh, Angela.
This conversation.
Ricky's a romantic too.
Truly. It is really sweet to see the 2 of them connect because she says the most earnest nonsense that does it made me like physically cringe.
Yeah. Yeah. She says, you're so beautiful. It hurts to look at you.
Yeah. But Ricky loves it. Yeah. And it's really sweet to see the 2 of them connect there.
One of the sweetest parts of this show is actually watching Angela and Ricky's friendship. It really, it's beautiful. But we get the actual danger now. We get 2 older guys that are like, that basically assault Rayanne. One of them does. The other one is like, dude, get out of here.
Yeah.
The cops show up. But Rayanne says, "Oh, perfect. We need a ride."
She's really funny. She asks him, "Can you do the siren?"
Yeah. She's having a great time.
Yeah.
She's having a great time.
We know she's got a little bit of a problem because Ricky says to Angela she won't remember this tomorrow. She blacks out when she drinks.
Yeah. Which we probably would have figured out anyway, but yeah, it's spelled out for us. But this is sort of a turning point for Angela because Jordan shows up then and sees them getting in the cop car and is like, wait, I know that girl.
I know that girl.
She's more interesting than I thought. Mm-hmm. She's getting arrested.
Mm-hmm. The playfulness before this when Rayanne is like, I have to go tell Jordan, and she's running off yelling, is really funny because Jordan's not even there.
No.
Like, she's just being silly.
Yeah. A bunch of scenes from the pilot are in the sort of like opening title scenes of the next episode, and that scene of them running is one of them because it's just such a... God, there's something about being out at night when you're a teenager and you're not supposed to be.
There's also that, like you said, giddiness is such a good word for it.
Yeah.
Of this, I don't know exactly what it is, but of that, like Angela, she knows Jordan isn't there either, but she is sort of like nervous about the idea of Rayanne telling him, but is also laughing and is, like you said, giddy about it because she also sort of would want her to if Jordan were there.
Yeah.
And that like kind of excitement is so specific. And
it's like the teasing part of their friendship too.
Yeah,
like her chasing after her. Mm-hmm. It's really sweet. Mm-hmm. The cops drop off Rayanne first. No one is there, obviously. And then he brings Angela home and she asks him not to come in. But she first is explaining Anne Frank to him, of course.
Of course.
And somehow he decides that instead of walking her to her door, he's going to entrust her to Brian, who has been reading in a tree with a flashlight.
He's just camped out, waiting for her to come home.
Fucking creepy.
I hate it. That was my,
I know.
That was him, even worse than all of the, gross stuff he said to her. That's the thing where I was like, dude, go home.
I know. I think later throughout the season, it's emphasized how long these kids have all known each other previous to Rayanne and Ricky. Brian, the neighbor kid that she's known since she was a child, he has this feeling of ownership because of the time not that he should, but because of how long they've known each other.
Right.
And the cop says, "Are you a friend of hers? Act like it. Watch out for her," which... Don't watch out for her. Leave her the fuck alone.
Yeah, that really,
yeah.
There's some gender stuff going on there that I didn't love.
Yeah. But she's walking down the street in the dark with him behind her, and she sees her dad having an animated conversation with a woman next to a car who is not her mother. And REM's Everybody Hurts starts to play, which is nail on the head, but also works. It's effective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also, again, I think the show got to kept the rights to a lot of its music, right?
Seems like it. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. We have two more scenes. One is one that still really gets to me, where she comes inside. Her dad is still outside talking to that woman. She goes into her room, and then she goes to her mom, and her mom is in bed looking at some notes or something, and she apologizes and starts crying, and her mom hugs her. And it's the first time that you see them act like they care about each other at all, and it's really, really... This is right after she says in voiceover that her mom was adopted, and she sees her mom as a full human for a minute, and her mom also sees her as a full human for a minute, and not just a problem.
Yeah, we've already talked a little bit about these parents getting to be more fleshed out characters, but we already know more about what her parents were like before they had kids than most of the parents I'm thinking of in the shows and movies we've watched and or will watch.
Definitely.
In just this first that we ever get in other shows. It's
and we talked about how Yeah. And we talked about how in 90210, there's like the Walsh parents, which they had a little bit of a storyline in the beginning and that fell away. But like, they're basically just these like cookie cutter good parents, you know, for the most part. And then other parents are contrasted against that as like the bad parents, you know, and Patty and Graham are neither. Like, they're mostly good, right? They're well-intentioned. They're, you know, they're not absent or raging alcoholics or abusive or anything. They're people that are fallible and have their own, are projecting their own things onto their children.
Right.
Exactly. You know? And so it's more nuanced. Cool. Yeah, I do too.
But it does feel like that same, I don't know what to make of this yet, but it's very similar to Brenda coming home after Max, Jason, after Rex breaks up with her.
Yeah.
And that like thing of even when there had been some tension between the mother and the daughter up to this point, that falls away, and the like unconditional kind of forgiveness.
Yeah. Like they have a safe place to come home to. And the contrast later on with lots of the other characters is that they don't. Right. Like Rayanne's mom isn't there. We assume things about Ricky's home life that turn out later to be very true. So Angela has the safe place to come home to, regardless and that's, of anything else.
Yeah. And that's the same in a lot of ways with the other parents in 90210, who, I mean, like lifestyle wise, those kids are all taken care of. But you can see that most of the parents that we meet in the pilot for 90210 do not feel like the kind of parents their kids could come home and cry to.
No,
if
they're not there,
they made a mistake like that. Exactly,
they're not home. Yeah, exactly. And then we get the final scene in school the next day. So she sees Jordan, he sees her, and he says, "Out on bail," and that's his line. And she like lights up. And they have a little quick conversation. She asks how his weekend is. He says it sucked. He leans against the lockers.
He's really good at that.
Yeah. And then gets distracted by something and is like, gotta go, and walks away. Like, he is not giving her much at all. And she is hanging on to every tiny, tiny bit of it. But then Ricky and Rayanne and a bunch of other associated people that we don't know come up. And they're talking about the night before and totally reframing it, of course.
Right.
And ignoring all the crazy shit and the bad stuff. And is like, did we have a time? Like, we had a time. And we see Angela kind of like buy into that reframing that Rayanne is doing.
It's all very teen. I know, I feel like we've said a version of that this whole time, but it is all very teenage in a way that 90210 does not necessarily feel like what's happening is actually very teenage.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think that like the escapades that they get into are a little bit more closer to reality. Nowadays, I don't think that for the most part, white middle to upper middle class teenagers are getting into the same kinds of trouble they used to get into. Again, it's the conversation we had last week about like, are teenagers having sex? I don't know. I don't want to know. But from everything, all the reporting tells me that like parents are just much more hovering and aware of where their kids are, phones, etc. You know, think piece, blah, 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 about how they're much more tethered to their parents now. Like when we were kids, I did this all the time. I lied all the time.
Yeah.
And snuck out the back door of my house after my parents had gone to bed and like walked into town. Like I was always lying and always out doing something I wasn't supposed to do in the middle of the night. And you know, nothing bad happened to me. I lived in a pretty safe place, but the stakes here seem more relatable. So that's where the pilot ends. I'm curious, since we've been talking about these as pilots, what do you think of this as a pilot for a show? Like, what is it setting up? What are you interested in? Like, how do you feel about it as the pilot? because we've been talking about this more as a cultural phenomenon and a show than we normally do about how the first episode sets us up.
Man, that's a really good question, especially
Thank
because
you
so much up until this point, so many of the pilots we watched were sort of really based in their like on the uncertainty of really high stakes stuff, right? So much of it is like what happened or what's going to happen to the entire world.
Right.
How did it happen?
We had our
Who's
apocalypse
in charge?
Run.
Yeah. Who's operating behind the scenes? There's none of that here.
Right.
And there was none of that last week. And we didn't really talk too much about 90210 as a pilot, right? I mean, a little bit, but as we're kind of shifting into this other conversation, I'm trying to put myself in the position of somebody watching this when it aired, who was maybe a little older than I am, because watching it now, I loved how real it felt and how like it's impossible to watch this and not feel nostalgia, even if I didn't watch the show when it aired, because it feels so real to the time. And so that makes me want to keep watching now in 2024. But I'm wondering what that would have, and I mean, you can tell me because you watched it, but it doesn't feel like, because I'm like, for me, it's not the will they, won't they of Jordan. It's not the, you know what I mean? I almost don't, maybe that's the Jared Leto of it all for me.
Yeah.
But like, I don't really imagine that, and knowing what you know about high school love and stuff, that even if she gets together with Jordan at some point, you know, it's not going to be her like, these two aren't getting married, right? Like, so I don't know what sort of stories are being set up here that I'm really interested in. It's more that I'm interested in just seeing these people continue to interact with one another.
And I think that's on watching this as an adult versus watching it at the age that these kids are.
Right.
Because to me, the most important thing was her and Jordan Catalano.
Right.
And I think that was the case for most people who were teenagers when the show came out. Everyone was obsessed. I cannot undersell how obsessed people were with Jared Leto's character and
so
her achieving getting him, right?
It's really funny because the show seems to know that he's an empty idiot.
But you're watching it as an adult. The show does, I think, but the people who watched it really were on her side in that. I think so that to me was the thrust of the show when I was a teenager, but watching it now, obviously it's also setting up Rayanne's home issues, a bit about Ricky's sexuality, a bit about her friendship with Sharon, and a bit about like Brian and their whatever. But all of those seeds are placed here, and all of them do, for a show that didn't know it wasn't going to last.
Yeah.
Not everything is solved, obviously, but a lot of these things are explored that are set up in the first episode.
That's cool. That's good to know. You can do that when you have 19 episodes.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't have like a neat conclusion, but it does all of the things, I will say as someone who's watched the whole thing, all of the bits and pieces it's laying in place in the beginning here are for a reason. Like, they're not just like empty promises. Like, we do get to see a bit more about Rayanne's situation. We do get a real moment for Ricky. Like, the parents get more elaborate storylines. We see actually like Sharon develop more as a character, and we get more sympathy for her. Even Brian, like having that episode where he's the narrator, like it does give him more three-dimensionality and engender at least a little bit of sympathy for him as a person. So I think looking at the whole series, I think it's a really good pilot. I don't know if I hadn't seen the rest of it, how I would feel, which I think is why I asked that question, because
I mean, I really liked it. It also felt like it flew by, which I had a great time watching 90210. I know it's longer.
Not by much. Actually, that's right. It was. It's like an hour and a half.
Yeah. And this, I think, it's 47 minutes, something like that.
Yep.
But it flew by. And I think I said to you, if I hadn't tried to go to bed early last night, I probably would have watched right through the next episode just to kind of see how things build. I think everybody's really charming and likable except for Brian. Yeah, this would have been, I would have been obsessed with this show if I were probably 4 or 5 years older.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is a show where if you meet anyone, especially a girl who is Gen X, and you mention this show, they're gonna be like, oh, that show. Like, everyone has that reaction to it. It literally happened last night. Like, I was talking to someone my age last night, and I brought up this show, and immediately it was just like, oh my God, like, just the tenderness of it, and the amazing, like, lines, and the cringe, and the accuracy, and all of it just is, like, was super important.
It's so funny. I really can't wait to talk about Dawson's Creek, because that show means everything to me. I know. But in a very different way. Like, not in a very different way, but, like, I don't know that tender is the word I would use to describe Dawson's Creek, or my feelings for it, certainly. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a different thing.
Interesting. Yeah, I got real emotional about this show, like, watching it again and watching Claire Danes portraying this. I mean, she has such a, like, subtle, expressive face.
She's great.
She's really great in it. There's a lovely interview between her and the creator that I watched on YouTube. I think I might have mentioned this already, but talking about how great their relationship was as a writer and an actor, like a young actor, and how important each of them was to the other. Like, the writer, Winnie talking to Claire Danes about how important it was for her to have an actor like that to play this role, and how much she, like, learned by watching her. And then Claire Danes talking about the mentorship involved with this writer. And it's a really, really sweet interview.
She also feels so unique, Claire Danes, in this show.
She is. She's unique. And like, when I think about her career, she is a very specific and unique actor in and of herself. Like, I don't think you watched, she was in 2022, there was a limited series, I guess. Fleischman is in Trouble.
Oh, I didn't. It's good. It's good.
It's good. It's real specific to a type of person. It's very, like, New York Times, New Yorker, literate, Manhattan
the
vibes.
Cast,
yeah.
I feel like all you need to know is that it stars Jesse Eisenberg, Claire Danes, and Lizzie Kaplan. I feel like that tells me everything I need to know.
Yes, it does.
Oh, and that their names, I'm so sorry. Are their names Libby and Toby?
Yes.
Okay.
It's based on a book. Anyway, all I wanted to say about that is her character her performance in that show is incredible. Incredible. She has given very little to do in the beginning, and you're lulled into thinking she's one thing, and then there's an episode that focuses on her, and she acts the shit out of that show. Aww. It's so good. Like, you really see every bit of why, like, what I'm saying about the way that her face works in this, and when she's 15, she's just spent her career, like, honing that. She's incredible in that show. I can't say the show's necessarily, like, something I would recommend watching, but her performance is incredible.
Maybe I would just recommend that instead you watch William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet.
Totally.
God, that movie is... I want to talk about things that were everything to me as a young person.
Yeah, that was a big one for me too.
It's perfect.
Yeah. I couldn't find a lot of reviews of it from the time. I mean, I was in it, so I know what the reaction was. But some of the fun commentary I found from, like, 20 years later, 25 years later.
Right.
There was a line in an article on Den of Geek that says, Angela Chase's punctuation of choice is the question mark. That girl doesn't have an exclamation point in her entire body.
That's such a teenage thing too, though. Like, she probably
does. A question. I know.
But you can't be emphatic about anything when you're 15 years old is so uncool.
I know. There was another article, one in the AV Club, where the author pointed out that Brian Krakow, when he's in the tree, he has a tin can holster for his flashlight nailed to the tree branch for his nighttime reading.
So he hangs out up there.
He hangs out up there a lot. Yep.
I wonder if he can see Angela's bedroom, like through her window.
Probably.
I'm not sure.
Probably. I did just want to mention, because I brought it up in the beginning, that there are some things out there about what the creator was thinking about for a season 2 if it happened. Yes. And I thought I'd just mention that. Whitney Holtzman said that if it had continued, a second season would potentially have seen Patty and Graham getting a divorce, which if you watch the whole 19 episodes, you'll kind of get. Angela turning to Brian for comfort.
Oh, boy.
Gross. Sharon dealing with a teen pregnancy.
Oh.
And Brian and Delia, who's a character we haven't met yet, getting together at some point. So I don't love some of that. So maybe it is okay that we got one beautiful season. But we'll never know.
Yeah. Some of that I'm like, I don't know that I need.
Yeah. A Brian redemption.
These shows love a teen pregnancy.
They really do, especially at this time frame. If I had known how hard it actually was to become pregnant for some people, I would have worried a lot less in my teen years. Actually, endometriosis awareness, people. It's a real thing. People have it. It does make it extremely difficult to get pregnant. I have it. And if I had known that when I was a teenager, my life would have been so much less stressful. So much. Nobody wanted to tell me that.
Right. Well, of course not.
They told me the rest of the symptoms and problems and stuff, but nobody was like, yeah, it's going to be real hard for you to get pregnant.
So here's one of the, on the plus side.
Yeah. I would have been all over the place, man.
Out of all the people I knew who were having sex in middle and high school, only 2 of them had kids.
Only 2?
Yeah. Is that a lot?
Yes. Oh. Yes. Yeah, where I grew up, that wasn't actually a thing that I ever really saw. It was more of a TV thing. Like, people I knew were having sex, but they weren't getting pregnant. So, good on the birth control. But yeah. Endometriosis. If you have really painful periods out there, get a diagnosis.
That's like a real thing. I mean, not obviously endometriosis is a real thing. What I mean is people just being fed the narrative that your period is just supposed to be excruciating and it's just something women have to deal with.
Yeah.
Like, I think endometriosis was one of those things that seems to be suddenly a thing. You know what I mean? Where it's like, why do women all of a sudden all have endometriosis? And it's like, no, they were just living with.
It takes an average of 7 years to get diagnosed.
Right.
I was diagnosed at like 13, but that is very, very
not the
rare.
Norm.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It was just so obvious. It's passing out in 8th grade. Anyway. That's for our endometriosis side podcast that will
10 million downloads.
That's really not going to draw people.
And we're going to call it endometrio, SIS with an exclamation point.
Oh my God, Andrea.
Oh, sis.
Andrea. That's either the worst thing
Thank you so much.
Oh, no.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. It's still going. I can't hear it. It is. That goes on for way too long.
That's either the worst thing I've ever heard or $1 million idea.
Hey, guess what? Could be both.
Could be both. Wow. Okay, anyway, on that note,
we just never come back for another episode. This is the last one.
And we just pop up as
we're rebranded.
Judy and Alyssa with an endometriosis podcast. Just never acknowledged that this existed.
It's really good.
Yeah. Also, I didn't realize this. 2 weeks after My So-Called Life ended, the WB began broadcasting, which was like the home of all those teen shows. So it kind of picked up the mantle.
I wonder if if it had been a WB show in the first place, if it would have survived, because they were obviously happy to let their teen shows kind of like Like the show we're going to watch next week also only got one season.
Yeah.
And then we're going to start to get into some teen shows that I think because of these shows and because, I mean, really of the WB, got a chance to really stick around. And that's when we get into these shows that got 5, 6, 7, 9 seasons.
Right. Yeah. Actually, the same different article on Den of Geek actually ties together this show and what we're doing next week. So we can, I don't know why we always act like it's a secret. Next week.
Don't tell them. Don't tell them.
I don't know what that is. Like why we're trying to build suspense. I mean, think about all the shows we might be doing. It's probably one of them. But in this article, it says, it's talking about the influence of My So-Called Life on future TV. And it says, my favorite of all influences, though, is in the character of Lindsay Weir from another terminally unlucky but brilliant show, Freaks and Geeks, which is what we're doing next year. Next year? Which is what we're doing next week. I'm leaving, by the way. No. I'll be back in January. They say, Angela Chase is pumping through Lindsay's DNA. The great student who suddenly changes her life and friends to find out who she is rings more than a few bells. And although there were just as many hilarious moments as serious ones, Freaks and Geeks really showcased how brilliant the genre My So-Called Life helped build really was. And so there's a reason that we're following My So-Called Life with Freaks and Geeks. There's a pretty direct line in both the character of Angela to Lindsay and also like the overall cultural vibe of those two shows really feels tied together.
And Freaks and Geeks is a show that you have watched? I can't remember.
I have. I don't know if I finished the whole first season, only season.
Gotcha.
I've watched some of it. And I liked it very much. So I feel like I probably finished it, but who knows?
This is another one of my weird ones. This is another one of my weird ones that I missed for some reason. And it aired just from 99 to 2000.
Yeah.
So I was 13 to 14 years old.
Yeah, perfect age.
It makes no sense that I didn't watch this show. And also that I haven't watched it. One of the reasons is I didn't realize it's another one I didn't realize was only one season. I think I would have watched My So-Called Life and Freaks and Geeks by now if I knew it was only one season.
Yeah.
That they were only one season. There's everything I know about Freaks and Geeks. I am prepared to love this pilot. We'll see if that's the case. I know there are some people in it who there's a little Jared Leto effect of maybe not being able to see them in the same light as I would have in 99, but I'm going to set that aside. There's also some
great people in it.
Yeah. The cast is nuts.
It really is. It's like a who's who of like later success.
It's a who's who of Judd Apatow's favorite people, I think 100%. Is what it actually is.
100%. And actually similar to My So-Called Life, it got 18 episodes. My So-Called Life got 19. So almost a full like season at that time.
Linda Cardellini, John Francis Daly, James Franco, Sam Levine, Seth Rogen, Jason Segel, Martin Starr. It's wild. Busy Phillips,
yeah.
AKA the love of my life.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty impressive.
It's an incredible cast. I'm excited to watch it. Where is it? I know it's on, I've seen it recently on something that I subscribe to. So where can you find it? No, it's on Pluto TV for free, which is great.
There you go.
It's also on 9 other places. Good.
Yeah.
Easy. It's on Hulu, Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, YouTube, Amazon Prime, Google Play, Apple TV. Yeah. Everywhere.
I'm excited to watch and talk about this one.
Well, and it's interesting because the one we just watched was very much of its time. This is a show not about its time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. That's a good point. It's the 1980s, and at McKinley High, there's 2 different groups of teenagers: the freaks
and
with cool and charismatic, Daniel Desario and tomboy Lindsay Weir, and the geeks with Lindsay's shy younger brother Sam.
Yeah,
chronicles the normal teen adolescent problems any teenager goes through. So that'll be fun to talk about what sort of setting a show in a different time period, and especially because like that 70s show is right around this time too, and we can talk about all of that as well.
Yeah.
Greece, we could talk about if we want to.
Okay. Yeah, 1989, I was just about to move into the city. I was graduating college, so I was a little bit past the actual window for being obsessed with the show in the moment.
Mm-hmm. And I was 13, so I should have, again. I was 13 and I was a freak and a geek. Like, I was a little bit of both, so I really should have.
There you go. All right. Anyway, where can they find us?
At WatchersPodNJ on Instagram, WatchersPodNJ@gmail. Let us know if you want the endometriosis podcast. We're ready to roll.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am Jodie_Mim, JODIE_MIM on Instagram. And
I'm at.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm at AQ Andrea Q, but you don't need any of this.
This is all
you don't need more of this.
Apart. Okay. I was trying to slyly look up where Freaks and Geeks was supposed to take place so I could
Detroit.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, got like a Midwest thing happening.
Yeah. Oh, here's something.
Chippewa, Michigan. A fictional suburb of Detroit. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. My housemate yesterday said that they were remembering a teen show set in Iowa.
Iowa?
And there isn't one, but they are clearly misremembering something.
Mm-hmm.
But in trying to figure out what that was, I thought maybe for some reason they were thinking of Freaks and Geeks. They say no. So if anybody knows of a show where, here's what I've got. They think cornfields play a large part in it.
Okay.
And also that it feels vaguely supernatural, but that nothing actually supernatural happens.
Did they watch the movie Twister?
Yeah, we watched it 3 days ago. It is not Kyle XY. It is not Roswell.
Okay.
Oh, I wonder if it's, what's the fuck? Smallville. I wonder if they're thinking of Smallville.
Oh, maybe.
And that seems like that would be a weird one to not remember.
Yeah.
But
you should
it
ask
could be
them.
Smallville. Yeah.
Okay. Well, next week we will be hanging out in Michigan with one of the most beautiful people on the planet, Linda Cardellini.
So true.
Cannot wait. Okay, bye.
It means bisexual.